Hello and welcome to Nelson All Over Cards. My name is Nelson and today we are starting a new series. We're going to be talking about the first villain in the game, doing kind of an analysis of that villain, tips and tricks on how to defeat him, and then ways to shake up the game, make it more fun or more challenging. Today we're talking about Rhino. So Rhino came in the first core set. It's the villain that they say to start the game out with, and I do think that the villain does a great job of showcasing the game's elements. But hot take, I don't think he's actually a super easy villain. He's on the easier side, but he's not the easiest villain in the game, and in true solo, he can be pretty challenging. So let's talk about how we can take down this brute. Now we're going to talk about his villain cards. We're going to be playing against standard Rhino. We're going to start on stage 1 and then move to stage 2. Most of these villain cards are pretty vanilla, which is kind of what we would expect from a starting villain. So let's focus directly on stage 1. He starts with a low scheme of 1 and 2 attack, 14 hit points per player. He gets a bit stronger when we knock him out the first time and push him into that stage 2, where he still has 1 scheme, which is really important, 3 attack and 15 hit points. However, he does have a win revealed when stage 2, which we do trigger if we are setting up the game for the first time in expert mode. So we put stage 2, we will trigger this win revealed, where we have to go get breaken and taken, which is the side scheme that comes in with a hazard icon, which we pass out 1 additional player card or encounter card each villain phase. It comes in with 2 threat plus 1 additional threat per player. Breaking and taken has to go. Extra encounter cards are really bad, so we want to thwart this the turn that it comes out if possible. A lot of the times, if I'm looking to flip Rhino and I'm playing standard, I'm about to knock Rhino out stage 1, I want to have an answer to breaking and taken, make sure that I can thwart it before he gets to give me that extra encounter card. One fun trick here is if you pull that card out by either getting like lucky in the previous villain phase, you get breaken and taken on the table, or if you use like a card like one way or another so you can pull that side scheme out, there's no detrimental effect if you do flip Rhino into stage 2 at that point. There is no penalty. So if you have breaken and taken out on the table, it's a good time to go ahead and push him into that stage 2 so you can kind of negate half of or part of that bad effect. If we are playing expert, those extra encounter cards, especially early in the game, can be super lethal. So when I'm looking at my opening turn, I want to mulligan and make sure that either the table or if I'm playing solo has an answer to that scheme, so we just don't get dunked on the first round. Encounter cards are bad. Encounter cards when you haven't built up and the villain can gain tempo on you, turn 1, not good. We don't like that. So make sure you get breaking and taken out of the game very, very quickly. When we're talking about expert, we start on that stage 2, and then we move to stage 3, which is actually pretty tough. Pun very much intended. It's a 1-4 with 16 hit points per player. But what's really mean about Rhino stage 3 is he gets toughness, which is going to block the next source of damage, and he stuns each hero. So when you flip him, you need to be aware of that. Unless you have plans for it, he's really going to slow down the damage you're pushing at him. Because this is only stunning heroes, you can cheat a little bit and push him while you're in alter ego, probably by like using an ally to attack. If you have an ally push Rhino into stage 3, if you're in alter ego, he only stuns the heroes, and you're not a hero at that point, so you can negate that stun. Then you can flip up and not worry too much about blocking so many activations. You will still need an answer to that tough, but at least you got rid of half of that. The main scheme in Rhino's deck is called the break-in. Really simple. If we hit 7 threat per player, we lose the game. This is probably what makes Rhino so hard, especially in solo. Because if we're going to be an alter ego and we pull that dreaded advance, we can easily hit a loss in solo, which can make it pretty swingy. And so now that variability is mitigated when we add more players to the game, but it is something to be cognizant about, knowing that we can lose pretty quickly, especially if there's an advance or a double scheme that goes on the break-in. It's tough. That's what I think makes it very difficult, especially in solo, is the insecurity of flipping down to alter ego because of that threat threshold being so very low. I do like running Justice against Rhino. This allows me to have a lot more access to Confuse, which gives us safe trips down to alter ego, but it also allows us to bring Under Surveillance, which adds over 50% cap to a solo game. And so we increase the threat threshold by 4, taking it up to 11, and you just have so much more flexibility when it comes to flipping down or letting threat pile up on the break-in, which can be very lethal if you don't have ways to mitigate it. talk about general strategy around Rhino. Like most villains in Marvel Champions, unless we're playing Rush, we want to build up as much as we can before we flip Rhino to his final stage. We keep the stats lower, there's less detriment, usually in Marvel Champions, there's less detriment in a earlier stage of a villain. So if we can just keep him on that first stage and let ourselves build up, gain that tempo, then we can flip and go. So instead of always pushing damage, most of the time in a lot of these videos, what I'm going to say is build in that first stage. That could be stage 1 in standard, stage 2 in expert. Keep the stats low and build. And unless we're playing Rush, that's where you're going to want to build, is in that first stage. Rhino can lose pretty quickly against characters who can build quickly. And outside of expert mode, there's nothing really stopping us from doing just that. Just staying and building. In expert, we need to take out Breakin' and Taken before we build too much, right? We want to take out Breakin' and Taken turn 1. Solo game, that's going to be 3 threat. Figure out how to do that. And after you kind of clear that, go straight into building, and there's really nothing that stops us from just spending the entire game in stage 1 or 2. Rhino has a pretty low average boost in his kit. Now we're just talking about standard and his kit. The mod set will change this, but in standard he has about 1.4 boost per card in standard and 1.8 in expert, because that expert set adds a couple more boost icons in there. But we can pretty much expect a low boost card. We know that there's nothing that has 3 or more boost cards unless we add some with the mod set. So our highest boost card in this kit is +2. So we can use that to our advantage and understand exactly what's the worst case scenario that Rhino can hit us with. If we know he's in stage 3, he's hitting us for 4, max boost is going to be a +2, or if we're playing standard, a +3. So we can use that to our advantage and count where we're going to see. If we see those 3 boost icons hit the discard pile, we have security and we can understand a little bit better exactly what that variability is going to be. Rhino has a lot of ways to slow down damage that players are throwing at him, like his armored suit. It prevents damage. He gives out tough status cards with his treachery card, I'm tough. He heals damage with hard to keep down, or in stage 3 with toughness and stunning. And he actually has a couple of guard minions. Like I said, I think Rhino does a really good job of showcasing pretty much a lot of the mechanics in Marvel Champions. But we need to be cognizant of this. We love piercing against Rhino. There's so many toughs in this scenario. We really wanted to highlight, or the game designers really wanted to highlight toughs in this scenario. So if you bring something to directly answer toughs, you're going to have a good time. That could be Wolverine getting piercing with his basic attacks, anywhere to piercing strike, right? If you have an answer to the tough the tough status cards that Rhino's going to give, you're going to have a little bit better of a time. One of the other strategy tips is I want to put at least 1 damage on Rhino quickly so we don't get surge with hard to keep down. This is not super important, but it is something I like to do if I can. So surge, or hard to keep down surges if it does not heal any damage. A lot of the time I don't like to push damage on villains super quickly, but with Rhino, knowing that there's a surge which can surge something into something way worse, like an extra activation, putting at least 1 damage on him, whether that's just a basic activation of a ping, an ally doing it, that I like to do that just so we don't surge with that treachery card. He is super susceptible to chump blocking. Rhino does not have a ton of answers to chump blocking, and unless he has overkill, which we'll talk about here in a second, we can just throw allies in front of Rhino's like 4 attack in stage 3. So if we have 1 health of an ally left, throw that in front of the attack. You will be okay, and you won't be surprised if he gets overkill. Rhino is super susceptible to chump blocking. One of the best ways to combat Rhino's high attack is to just throw a lot of cheap allies on the table and let the semi-truck that is Rhino just run them over. Now, where this gets tricky is he has 2 copies of a very scary attachment called Charge, which gives him overkill. This can be brutal because it gives him a boost to his attack and overkill. That chump blocking strategy can get a little tricky. This also is doubly brutal because going to Alter Ego can be so dangerous with Rhino. So if we take a huge attack, Alter Ego is the primary way that we can heal in this game. And so if we don't have the security of flipping to Alter Ego, Charge can be brutal. So if you take a lot of damage, this can be a very tricky situation to find yourself in. If you're running in multiplayer, you can kind of ask your protection friend to step in front of the charge attack because that charge goes away after Rhino attacks. In solo, the way that I like to deal with charge is I like to try and keep my health high enough so that when I defend against a charge attack, and remember that we know the boost cards and there's not really a ton of 3 boosts in there, I don't just straight up die. Or if I'm lucky enough, if I've counted my boost cards correctly, there are some times where I'll take that charge attack undefended, especially if I have a under surveillance or a confuse that allows me to roll down and heal that damage. Or if you're set up for it, just stun lock them and you'll be fine. If you bring stun, there's nothing Rhino can do to answer stun except for a lot of his extra activations, which is the next section we're going to be talking about. The last section is just kind of general strategy advice to look out for. He has 3 extra attacks in his kit, and I'm not counting the 3 from the standard set with Stampede. Know where these are. Be counting where Stampedes are and when they come out, because Rhino can attack multiple times, and that can be super lethal, especially if he's in that stage 3 with a 4 attack. Previous strategy here of chump blocking gets even better. Use cheap allies. Throw a ton of cheap allies out there. Use them to thwart, use them to ping, throw them in front of Rhino, and keep them out. I don't like using my final damage on a consequential with an ally, especially against Rhino, because Rhino can get those surprise attacks. He has 6 of them in the deck. He's going to be attacking you. Make sure that you at least have an answer to 1 attack or 2 if you can set up for it. He has a really low threat threshold, so please count those advances and know where they are. I very rarely roll down to Alter Ego if I know that there's a advance or 2 in a thin encounter deck, because that can be super lethal. Starting double scheme, tough. If you bring Confuse to the table, that's going to be nice. I will confuse Rhino. I'll sit him on Confuse, and I won't even roll down. Just knowing that there's an advance in the deck, that's going to be very beneficial. The last surprise lethal card here to talk about is Shocker, who does deal damage to each hero when they're revealed. Note, it is each hero, not Alter Ego. So if you're an Alter Ego, you are safe from Shocker. But if you have 1 health left, which is a situation I find myself in surprisingly often against Rhino, this can end the game. If you flip Shocker, it's an unblockable damage outside of a couple of protection cards. You can lose the game. So remember, if you have 1 health, know where Shocker is. If he's in the discard pile, you're a little bit safer, but just know that that is a game ender. What are some of the strategy you use to take down Rhino? Drop those down in the comments. I look forward to hearing some ways that you all like to take him down. We're going to transition into talking about modular sets. So the first section here, and that we'll probably talk about in every single one of these videos going forward, is a mod set to make the encounter easier. That being said, it's a bit hard to reduce the difficulty of the suggested Bomb Scare mod set in this kit. Honestly, Bomb Scare is pretty much the easiest I think we can get. Let me know if you have a way to make Rhino easier, because I struggled with coming up with one. But Bomb Scare is probably the easiest mod set. Now, a mod set to make it harder is a couple options. I initially went to Mr. Hyde from the hood. That was my first go-to, but I think the Treachery card Hyde formula can be like an auto-loss card. And so if you want a stupid fun challenge that can be very swingy and you can lose just based on 1 encounter card draw, you can do that. The reason that I went here for Mr. Hyde is that Rhino is a brute, so self-experimentation would interrupt dealing damage to Rhino, and you would have to remove it as threat from the self-experimentation side scheme. So I thought that was kind of fun, but that Hyde formula was a little tough. That is something that I wanted to call out, but that is super swingy, so I'm going to go with a different mod set that's also from the hood called Ransacked Armory. So this brings a lot of tech attachments for minions, and then if there's not a minion in play, a lot of times this will either surge or you have to go search for a minion and then put it onto the table. This means you're going to get to see a lot more minions, which is something you don't get to a ton with Rhino. But I feel like Ransacked Armory can really force interactions with minions, which can make it a little bit tricky with Rhino. So I would recommend Ransacked Armory to up that difficulty just a little bit. Next section, we're going to talk about heroes. So we're going to talk about a good hero, a challenge hero, and a fun hero to play against Rhino. And these are super subjective, but let me know what you think of different heroes that you like running against Rhino in the comments. A good hero, a strong hero to run against Rhino is going to be Venom. Venom can answer Rhino's threats pretty well. He has Stun and Confuse in his kit, and we're going to be able to take safe trips down to Alter Ego for confusing. We're going to have a lot of healing with Project Rebirth, and if we absolutely need to, his basic recovery. We can have massive defense with his Venom's pistols. Venom is a very flexible hero, and he's going to be able to answer a lot of the high threat stuff, not necessarily thwarting, but like high attack, high damage, high output that Rhino is going to throw at us. Then we can combat his tough and his guard minions with overkill with savage attack, and then his toughs we can ping with multi-gun. So we got a lot of kind of ways that we can combat Rhino, and it feels like Venom was kind of set up so that we can just like kind of attack Rhino in any side where he lets his guard down. So go out, crush Rhino with Venom. If you want a fun hero, I have to stick with the core box and go Spider-Man, right? This is honestly the first game that they suggest you play, and I mean, it's fun, right? I feel like almost all of us have played Spider-Man vs. Rhino at some point in our life, but it is just a super fun scenario to try. I would suggest running Justice with Spider-Man. A lot of Spider-Man's a lot of his thwarting is tied to defeating minions, and if we don't have a lot of minions, which we're not seeing a ton of in Rhino, then those spider tracers can be a little challenging to play and trigger. And so I would probably suggest Justice to help offset that low thwarting for a fun matchup. Now, Backflip is a super thematic and strong counter to Charge, which is another reason why I think it's a really fun matchup. If you can get that card draw, if you can get the backflip when you know you're going to get charged, oh my goodness, it's so satisfying to take an attack of 7 plus a boost card to the face and just, nope, don't need that. You also get a lot of card draw because Rhino's going to be attacking a lot, and so his Spider Sense trigger is going to happen pretty frequently, and so it brings some friends to chump, but even if you get caught without an ally, Spider-Man can easily defend for himself, and if worse comes to worse and you get like 3 activations, Aunt May can help you with any damage that does sneak by and hits Peter. So I like Spider-Man. I think he's a super fun and thematic hero to take up against Rhino. Now the challenge hero, the one that I think is going to provide a fun challenge, not necessarily the most challenging hero, but a fun challenge, is Hawkeye. Now, Hawkeye is squishy. Hawkeye does not have a lot of health. He has a very low defense, and so that's going to be something that he's going to struggle with against Rhino. You do have Stunlock, which can be nice, but he also has really low thwarting. But Hawkeye doesn't need to go to Alter Ego too much, so you don't need to worry too much about that unless you get hit hard and you need to go bandage some wounds. I don't know. Throwing a I don't know. I think it's going to be a challenge. Hawkeye's weaknesses are Rhino's strengths, but there are ways that we can deck build and tech against it. We have Confuse and Stun in Hawkeye's kit, so if we can get that rolling pretty quickly, Rhino can get negated, but it's going to be a fun one. So try Hawkeye against Rhino, and yeah, I think that'll be fun. Good luck. Good luck with that one. Thank you so very much for hanging out. Make sure to subscribe to the channel for future villains. Next up, we're just going to go straight through chronologically. We're going to be talking about Claw next. Also, let me know if you have any questions about Rhino or strategies to take him out. And this is the first video in this villain series, so if you have suggestions on what you want to see in future videos, let me know. I kind of thought this was what was fun in the video, and so if there's something that I completely forgot or something that you think would be fun to see in future videos, drop that in the comments and we'll add it. Cool. Hope you all have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.